Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? We are Off Ball Takes coming at you live, with a, recap episode. So, this is kind of recapping the Lakers game that happened today. Lakers versus Denver. It literally just went off. And Denver came out with the win on this one, 132 to 126. And, that's just for, the few of you guys who are in here. I think it's about two or three of you. So we appreciate you guys for showing out and popping through the live stream. We're a small community, but we love each and every one of you. You guys support us, and we hope that you just enjoy our content. And before we get started, if you aren't, please do like and subscribe. It helps us out a bunch. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for coming through. But yeah, to kick this thing off, I guess we should really start with, I guess we got to shout out. Before we get into the winners, I want to shout out the Lakers on this one because I thought this was a valiant effort from them. It kind of was a stinker through like about three quarters, but they there was a valiant effort of coming back. Dude, we're trying to be serious and have serious content here, and you guys are coming in here trolling. Like, what is that emote? But anyways, yeah. So I guess we should really start with the winners on this one. Jokic, he dropped a monster game, 34 points, 14 assists. 21 rebounds. Exactly. W troll. But man, this is what I'm talking about. I feel like with Jokic, he is the real MVP in this situation. And he's proving it. He's proving why he is better than Embiid, I think. I just feel like that kind of stat line in the playoffs is kind of ridiculous. I think it's one of a kind esque, but to move on down the line, I don't want to harp on Jokic too long because I don't want to be called glazing or anything like that. We love you too, man. But Jamal Murray, he had 31 points. And I think that's what you need. If you're looking at Denver, that is what you need 100%. Because if you think about it, the question marks that we had coming into this series were, can Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., all the rest of the guys step up and elevate their game and their play to match Jokic. And I think, in this game, Jamal Murray did so. He did get into foul trouble. I believe he had 5 fouls. But, he had it was 4. Okay, yeah.
They overturned that call when he had 5 fouls.
Yeah. So, Jamal Murray had 31 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. I think the playoffs is really where guys show their, yeah. It does, and it exposes, the frauds, the guys who maybe aren't as good as you think, the regular season teams, true talent, exactly, and also true experience. It just shows you, the more seasoned guys are gonna go farther. Because if you look at the playoffs and how they're structured right now, and who's where, most of these teams are pretty seasoned. They've been pretty far in the playoffs or to the finals, even championship squads. So, there are some guys here that have been here before multiple times. And, most of the rookies, like not literal rookies, but, the young guys who haven't been very far in the playoffs or been pretty unlucky in the playoffs, they're not here anymore. Exactly. Intrinsic talent. But, to move on down the roster, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I thought he had a great game. He had 21 points. He definitely stepped up. Aaron Gordon, 12 points, not too crazy, but, he did have some kind of momentum shifting plays where, he kind of just sucked the life out of the arena, like that lob dunk on the fast break after the botched play with LeBron. And I think it was Austin Reeves in like the fourth quarter, I believe. It was like 2 minutes left. But, I thought that was a good play from him. Michael Porter Jr., 15 points, 10 rebounds. Kind of wanted more from him. I think, if you got more from him,
I like the 2 blocks, though.
Sure. But, I feel like if you got more from him, we could have potentially, seen a bigger win from Denver. But, it is what it is. Bro wanted revenge from. Are you talking about KCP? I think he's talking about KCP.
I think he's talking about.
Yeah. And then, Bruce Brown, he had a huge impact off the bench. I think he's one of their stronger bench players. He had 16 points, 2 assists, 4 rebounds. Then Jeff Green, 3 points, and everyone else is just garbage time minutes. So, that was just my take on Denver. That was just a recap of what they did. And I like this, but I feel like the problem with the Nuggets is I think they realized tonight that you can't let your foot off the gas with this Lakers team because I feel like they're resilient. They have potential to come back, and when they get hot, they can be very hot. And I think this was a really good shooting game from both teams because it's funny. I think Denver is the number one ranked offense in these playoffs, and then I think the Lakers are the number one ranked defense. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. But looking at the team stats, Denver shot 54%, and so did the Lakers. They were pretty much even on the shooting percentages. 3-pointers, there was only 1% differential. Lakers shot 45%, and the Nuggets shot 46. Nuggets in 6. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning. Well, no, actually, no. I'm not gonna say I'm leaning there. I'm leaning with the Lakers still. And then free throw wise, Lakers shot 88% and the Nuggets shot 77. So I mean, it was kind of an even game, but I mean, like, I don't know. The Lakers were down pretty heavily in like the first half, I think.
They were down by 21, I think.
Exactly.
I think they might have been down by 21 in the third.
Yeah, but they erased it. But I'm gonna really let you talk about the Lakers because this is your squad. But just my quick thoughts. I think Anthony Davis showed up, but AR showed up too, LeBron as well. But there's got to be just one more guy that can just, I don't know. I'll let you talk about it, but it was kind of funky. I didn't like what I saw from the Lakers tonight.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm kind of with you where I'm still probably leaning towards Lakers. I think like the Lakers got waxed pretty early in the game.
Yeah.
That starting five, they started that against the Warriors. Personally, I wasn't a fan of it going into this series because I think the Nuggets size is a little bit too big for that lineup.
Right.
And you saw what was happening in the first half, right? Denver was getting every offensive rebound.
Yeah.
A lot of the Denver's bigger guys, right? They were just shooting. Like you saw Michael Porter Jr., you saw some of the clips of him shooting over guys like Reeves or Schroeder, right? Just too much.
Yeah.
Right. In the second half, though, the LA, they made a lot of adjustments. Rui Hachimura, they put him on Jokic to get AD in the middle of the paint, controlling everything. And that was kind of how LA was able to make their comeback. Like some of it, you could argue, yes, Denver took the foot off the gas, but there were also some real adjustments like that. Of course, this was another game where they, D'Lo couldn't really play down the stretch, so they had to use Schroeder.
Yeah.
For the defense. Denver's shot making though was also just kind of insane.
Yes.
At different points. I mean, a game you lose by 6, right? You had that crazy Jokic 3 at the end of the third. The Jamal Murray heave, I think, at the end of the shot clock at one point in the fourth. When you look at again, and with the shooting percentages, they shot 55%, but a lot of that was them playing catch up because I don't think they were shooting that well for most of the game. And then when you look at the offense, like most of the Lakers' damage was around the basket, right? Because like the 3-point percentage, I mean, Denver made a few more threes than LA, right? But a lot of it was like, AD wasn't getting 40 points off of jump shots. It was a lot of shots around the rim. Same with LeBron, right? I don't think he made a 3 at all, right? So most of his offense was at the rim. Same with Rui, right? Most of his offense was around the rim or that mid-range area, right? Reeves hit a decent amount of threes, but for me, it's kind of just like I think that the Lakers' adjustments that they made in the second half were real. And I think you can carry that into the second game, right? Like I think like if you go with that game plan of going super small, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
Right? Because Denver, I think, just has too much size and too much offense, and they crash the glass. So like you can't do that against a bigger athletic team.
Sure.
But I think the lineup that we saw with Rui, Dennis, Reeves, LeBron, AD, I think that's a lineup that's probably going to be their best lineup in the series, depending on how D'Lo plays, right? Because if he plays well, we know defensively he's not going to do a whole lot against Jamal Murray. But if his offense shows up, right, it could either be him or Schroeder, right? Yeah. Schroeder's a better defender. It just kind of depends. So like you said, I'm still leaning towards the Lakers because I just feel like I think that those adjustments that they made, you can carry over into the next game, right? Like if this had stayed a blowout, it would have been like, I don't know. But like I said, I just thought that when you put yourself into a hole the way that they did in that first half where you started off with a tiny lineup. And I mean, Jokic had like 12 rebounds in the first quarter. Right. And again, he's a terrific rebounder, but that's a rebounding stat you have for a whole game, not for the first 5, 10 minutes of a quarter. Right. Like that shouldn't happen. I thought the effort in the first half was also kind of bad from them. It just felt like
they wanted it.
Yeah, it felt kind of like a sleepwalking effort, especially defensively, right? Because their defense was pretty bad for most of the game up until like, midway late through the third and then the fourth.
Yeah.
Right. So if you keep that up, I think you can win game 2 because all you have to do is win 1 in Denver. Even if you lose game 1, like, the series is not over, right? Because we've
You need the
seen
split though.
yeah, you need the split, right? If you're down 2-0, you're in trouble. I mean, you can hold home court and get it back, but you still have to win at least 1 in Denver.
Exactly.
Um, so, like, for me, I mean, like, we've seen this before with these other series, right? We've seen Sacramento go up 2-0, still lose in 7 because they
Yep.
lost 2 games at home.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Memphis, right? They tied up the series, right, going back to LA, but because they lost in Memphis, right, that was the series.
Yeah.
So I'm still, like you said, I'm still leaning towards LA because it just, I mean, LA's offense at the rim seems pretty sustainable to me, right? I mean, like you look at Denver, they don't really have much rim protection,
Not
right?
at all.
Jokic, though he had 2 blocks, right? He's not a rim protector.
Nope.
Um, Gordon's a good defender, right? But he can't
Mhm.
stop both LeBron and AD.
Yeah.
So it just again, if you got like you said, if you got a couple other guys to show up, like if you even had like an average D'Lo game, right? Maybe you don't go, in as big of a hole. I mean, minus 25 in a
Yeah.
game
He
that
had a
was a
bad game
6 point game.
for sure.
That was pretty. Yeah, exactly. And again, most of the guys were bad in the first half, so I'm not singling out just him, because most of them were bad in the first half. But I think in general, if you play with more size, right? Like, I don't think I think they can still win game 2 and still probably, like, win the series. It's just, again, we need to see those adjustments at the start of game 2. Maybe they start Rui. Um, and maybe you put like another bigger guy out there in the non AD minutes. Cause again, like, still going with LeBron and Rui as your 4 and 5 just
It's
doesn't
not
feel
gonna
great,
work.
in my opinion. I know Mo Bamba's hurt, and I'm not saying he's like a game changer or a series changer, but like, maybe if you put another big guy out there, and just in general, like I said, keep the switch thing with Rui on Jokic, right? Because it seemed like that was working, right? Because I mean, Jokic didn't really do a whole lot with Rui's time on him, and it's like it's kind of weird because you're like, there's such a huge size discrepancy, so it's like, how
Well,
is he doing that?
I
But
think, sorry, I do want to speak on that. I think that's a good topic to kind of harp on for a little bit. I noticed, I think the Lakers game plan when they have 80 closer to the basket and like he's kind of just ball watching and
yeah,
seeing, if
only
Jokic is going to be there, he can
yeah,
play the help defense and potentially slow him down and get a stop. I think that's better than, having
one on one,
AD, yeah, having AD, being posted up against Jokic and then Jokic, finds a cutter, slipper, or
right?
somebody in the corner, and it's like, well, now we don't have any rim protection, so we're kind of
I don't
screwed.
think, yeah, you can't play him one on one.
No, and
He's
I think
too good.
it's either you double him or you put somebody smaller on him, bait him into the post, and then hopefully AD can make the help
Exactly.
defense play. So I did like that adjustment, but
Yeah, and
continue.
if you're
Sorry,
gonna double, like, you gotta double hard, you
hard,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, you can't just, like,
can't show
kinda
it
like, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't."
right,
Like, if you wait too long, again, he's too good of a passer where
yeah,
he'll find the open guy,
right,
as quick as anybody. So, I mean, like, and again, it's a tough matchup, right? Because, like, again, even though AD had, like, a few possessions where he did a good job one-on-one, just like in general, that's not gonna work. Because
yeah,
again, you can't put that guy on an island against Jokic
no,
because Jokic is too good offensively. So if again, it's kind of like the same thing with the Warriors and the Grizzlies, right? If the Lakers can keep AD around the rim on defense, not having to necessarily guard a specific guy, but just kind of be in the center of everything,
yeah,
it's going to be tough for Denver to score around the rim. Again, they can hit their threes, but again, that shot making, I just don't think it's sustainable. I mean, some of the shots they were hitting, I mean, again, you give credit to some of those, but some of those were also just ridiculous.
I
I
get it,
mean,
yeah,
again, like the Jokic three, right? The Jamal Murray one. And again, that's going to happen with NBA players, especially like skilled offensive players. But again, it's like, is that going to happen every single game?
right,
I just, because again, like, you can just see, like, because the way that the Lakers got back, yeah, Reeves hit some threes, but also it was just getting to the rim, actually trying defensively, playing big, using your size, and then pushing the ball in transition. Because that was the other thing, right? Denver's a great transition offense. When you make mistakes, they're gonna punish you every single time, right?
yes,
Because the Lakers had a lot of bad turnovers. The live ball ones are the worst ones, right? Worse than just throwing the ball out of
right,
bounds or a moving screen. Because whenever you do that, the other team is gonna score every time, right? Either a live ball turnover off of like a steal or just like a bad shot, like a quick shot. You know what I mean? Like where you just
yes,
kind of chuck up a shot,
hmm
that has probably 0% chance of going in, or like just one of those plays where it's just like he's just like a miscue. So like
yes,
just in general, like Denver's a good team or a really good team, and when you make those type of mistakes, you're in trouble. So you got to calm down on the mistakes, right? Keep those adjustments going, and I think they can still win game 2. Because again, despite all that happened with Denver, right, with Jokic and Murray playing great, and
Mm-hmm.
most of the other role players playing well, right? Like KCP had 21.
I
That's
know.
a really good game for
That's
him.
good. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, like just in general, right? Like I don't feel like that's sustainable over the course of a 7 game
Sure.
series. Because I mean, like
They're
some of
too
those
up and
guys,
down.
yeah, and again, like they're good. I'm not trying to say that they're not good. Like, I mean, because again, even though we both picked the Lakers to win the series, we both know that Denver can win the series, and it's not like
Easily.
we thought that like either team is like demonstrably better than the other. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I think just in general, I liked what I saw in the second half. It's just again that first half was just such a killer.
Yeah, it
Like
was so slow.
yeah, I just don't understand why you would go small against that team because I understand I didn't even like it much against Golden State, but at least with Golden State, like because they're a small team, like if they're not shooting well, they may not necessarily kill you, right? But Denver can just because they're just bigger than you, even if they're not shooting well, like they can easily crash the glass like Golden State, but they just have more size, right?
Yeah.
Like
And
I mean,
oddly
Jokic
enough,
is mhm.
sorry, I'll
Jokic
actually
is a big
continue.
dude.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, Jokic is big. Aaron Gordon, even though he's not super tall, right? He's a great athlete. Michael Porter Jr. is big for a wing, even though he doesn't always play like it, right? But he's 6'10".
Yeah.
And even Jamal Murray's big for a point guard. But go on.
But I was gonna say, I kind of found it interesting, like, you know, when Jokic isn't out there, they kind of just like put Jeff Green at center or something. Jeff Green or Aaron Gordon. I think it's
Yeah, they
probably
don't
more
use
so Aaron Gordon.
they don't use their backup bigs at all. It's
Exactly.
Aaron Gordon at center.
And it's kind of interesting, like, so I kind of do understand the logic of having the LeBron and Rui thing, but at the same time, it just doesn't work. I don't know
Yeah,
why. It doesn't look good. So
yeah.
I don't know what the Lakers can do to mitigate that, but that needs to, I think, come to a close because it
Yeah, I
doesn't
think
look like it helps them.
I think that like in the non-Jokic minutes, I think that's probably just have either Wenyen out there
Yeah,
or if
Wenyan Gabriel would be a big
or
help.
if Bamba's healthy, maybe you can try him.
Hmm.
I just think that's not enough size and to put out there. Like and again, even though Denver's small when Jokic is off the floor, like the LeBron Rui minutes just they don't work that well.
Yeah,
Like against Memphis, against Golden State, they might have had like moments where they were okay, but usually they were getting blasted. And again,
yeah,
like usually gonna lose the non AD minutes, but what you can't do is get crushed, right? Because like
exactly.
they were getting crushed in a lot of those non AD minutes, right? Because again, it's one thing to either like I don't expect them to, extend like let's say they were up, right? Which they weren't, but let's say they were up and then AD's off the floor. I don't expect you to increase the lead by a ton if AD's off the floor.
Right.
But at the very least, either like kind of hold steady or like maybe like you lose the minutes by a little bit. Try not to, don't get crushed. But again, that's kind of one of the weaknesses when you don't have like a great option as a backup center because it's not like Wenyen and Bamba are great options, but they do have some level of size and Wenyen can move a little bit. So it's just like you at least got to try it. But
Yeah,
either way, like I said, Rui, I think we talked about this going into the series where he's a big X factor. He played pretty well.
yeah,
I mean, he played. He's another guy where it just seems like Denver has no answers for him around the basket, and that's how LA is going to win the series because they're not going to win by out shooting Denver. Just like they're not going to beat most. They're not going to beat most teams by out shooting them because they're not as good of a 3-point shooting team
right.
as most teams. You got to punish them around the rim. Um, get to the basket, get to the free throw line, get guys in foul trouble. That's how you win. And I think they can do that. Because again, if you saw in the second half, Denver had no answers around the basket. I mean, like LeBron, AD, I mean, like they were getting to the rim pretty much every time. I mean, AD had 40 points. And again, it wasn't like it was, I mean, I know he made a three and, a few tough shots, but a lot of it was around the basket. And even
Yeah,
LeBron, right? Like he was 0 of 4 from three, but he still shot way above 50%.
exactly.
Exactly. So I mean, like he shot almost 60% despite being 0 of 4 from three. So it's just and even Rui, 8 of 11 from the field, and it's just like again, I think that's a sustainable process. It's just the process took a little bit too long. But I still think you need a semi better game, at least from D'Lo, because like
Yes.
again, like I understand that like maybe this not is not a great matchup for him because again, like Jamal Murray like, he's gonna do a lot of things
Yeah.
offensively that D'Lo isn't necessarily capable of every night.
Right.
And again, like, okay, if he's not guarding D'Lo, then KCP shouldn't be going off like the way he was. I mean, like it was a lot of like, you know, either spot up jumpers or like those dribble handoffs or like,
Yes.
just like off a simple screen. Like that can't happen if you're D'Lo. You gotta pay more attention. And again, he's not a great defender, but
No.
again, like you need a little bit better production out of him. But again, despite him not playing that well, you again, you still had a chance to win. Like this was not like a game where it was like, oh, it's over, it's over, it's over. Like they fought, I think it was what, like a 3-point game or so with like a minute
Yeah.
to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Mhm.
What was the score? I think it was like a 3-point game. Yeah, LeBron misses the three, right? It was
Mhm.
129 Denver, 126 LA, and LeBron misses the three,
Right.
right? He goes in, didn't necessarily love the shot.
No.
Again, considering his three wasn't falling. But again, like I didn't expect them to come back and win because I just think when you're down by that much, I just think like it's really difficult because you have to play perfect basketball down the stretch, to overcome a 20-point deficit. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Whereas the other team just has to, just be semi competent and they'll still probably win. Because
Right.
again, again, it wasn't like Denver was amazing down the stretch. They were actually not really that great, but they did just enough, right, to hold off LA's run, right? Because every time LA would go on like a big run, where let's say they go on a 9-0 run, 6-0 run, right? Then Denver would just hit a couple of shots. Again, like I think LA got it to what was it, 11?
Yes.
At the end
11.
of the third, right?
Yes,
And then,
11.
like I said, Jokic hits the crazy buzzer-beating fall away three, where it's like you played great defense, but again, the shot goes in, and instead it's a 14-point game. So it's
Right.
just like stuff like that. Like I said, I think you can carry that into the next game. But again, I do feel like game two kind of is a must win. Again, I
Mhm.
do think with LA's experience, like I'm not going to say it's over after going down 2-0, but I think that they do need to win game two because again, got to win at least one game in Denver, and you'd preferably like to win one before you go back to
Yeah.
LA, because then
Not
like that,
after.
yeah, because then it puts a lot of pressure to hold home court.
Yep.
Again, they're undefeated in LA, just like Denver is undefeated at home.
Yep.
But I do think they need to win game two. But I feel like they probably will win game two. Again, I wouldn't say I'm super confident about it, but I do like the adjustments they made. And I think as long as you don't wait too late to make those adjustments, which they know what adjustments to make, I don't think that Denver is going to shoot that great on those type of shots for like an entire series. They're going to have games like that. They're an awesome offensive team. Um, but again, like if LA can get to the rim like that, I think they still have a chance to win game two.
Sure. I mean, I agree with all those points pretty much. And in regards to the whole D'Lo thing, I feel like I kind of said this earlier on in the playoffs. I think it might have been when they were playing Memphis. Even, I was saying I think you need D'Lo to hit around 15 points, honestly, efficiently, for for him to for it to be considered a good game and a positive game for him. Because like I don't know, his impact is so. It's kind of like similar to the Julius Randle thing, when he plays bad, it does affect the entire team and trickles down. It's just
I mean,
weird. And the
yeah, I mean,
energy is kind of off when he plays bad.
yeah. The thing is, they've been able to survive like some of these games where he plays bad because you
Mhm.
do have Dennis, right? So like if D'Lo doesn't play well, you can put Dennis out there, and even if Dennis isn't scoring well, he at least competes defensively.
Right.
So you're not really losing too much with Dennis out there.
Sure.
But, again, like if D'Lo's gonna start, which I'm gonna assume he will, I don't
Yeah.
think assuming they change the starting lineup, I'm assuming Dennis comes out, probably not D'Lo, because
Yeah.
again, like he's the guy making max money. So I don't think he's gonna,
And I think he's a
come
better
off.
passer too. And I feel like he just fits a little bit better.
Yeah, so just like in general, I mean, like they can survive without him playing well, but again, if he's gonna be out there, like he can't be like, that bad. Like, because again, like the defense, is not gonna be consistent from him.
Right.
So you got to get a decent offensive game. But
Yeah.
again, like, just in general, like nobody really played that great in the first half, right? Otherwise they wouldn't have been down by like almost 20, right? So
Yeah.
I
It
mean,
was
like,
really ugly.
yeah, exactly. Like the effort wasn't there. So I'm not gonna single out just him,
No.
but like, in general, when he plays well, they're obviously a much better team, right? Because then again, because he does things offensively that Dennis doesn't normally do, right? He's a better 3-point shooter. Like you said, he's a better passer. It's just kind of weird because again, like there's times where I feel like he kind of just settles for too many jumpers, and I did get he's a decent outside shooter, but since he's been back in LA, I feel like there's been a lot of times where I've seen him play, a solid possession, like driving to the basket. Like I don't think he's bad. I think he's a pretty decent finisher around the
Yeah.
rim, even though he's not like an explosive finisher.
Right.
It's just like when he's kind of like just relegated to taking a lot of jumpers, that's kind of usually when I feel like you get the bad version of
Sure.
D'Lo.
I mean, I feel like, because he gets forced into, okay, I'm not going to say forced, but he sometimes takes some really bad shots. I think, that's kind of an issue that he somewhat has sometimes, and it's like, they're really contested, difficult shots where, you could be more efficient if you're either giving it up to somebody else or, something along those lines, or even just being a little bit more patient. But
Yeah.
I mean, did we have anything more to say about this? Because I mean, I feel like this game doesn't really change what I'm thinking. Like I said, I think if the Lakers, if Denver loses at home, I have the Lakers, winning this series.
I
That
think
that's
so
kind of
too.
the motto and the mantra that I'm gonna stick with. I think until it gets proven wrong or whatever.
I think
Um,
Denver has to win every game in Denver in order to.
exactly. So yeah, if they lose one in Denver, I think it's grits and it's done for them. But I mean,
And they almost could have, and they could have. I mean,
exactly. And I think this shows us the power of this Lakers squad because initially I was like, holy crap, like this is kind of uh like a power showcase for Denver, because I was like, they're down 21. This is just not looking good for them. And then, in the snap of a finger, they're they're down by like what, 9 and then 6 and then 3. So it's like,
yeah,
okay, this
exactly.
this Lakers squad, they have firepower, so you just
Yeah.
can't underestimate them, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons you pick them as your dark horse in the West.
Like I said, they would keep every time they would, kind of come back, Denver would hit just a couple of shots to keep them at bay,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, just a couple. And again, that's what you have to do when you have a lead. You don't have to play great. You just
Hmm.
have to kind of just, hold on a little bit. But again, like the ease at which they kind of came back, it was kind of like, wow. I'm like,
Sure.
because again, like the ease at which because again, like every time they were getting to the rim, it was pretty much, you know, like a guarantee. I mean, again, they shot 55% from the field, and it wasn't like they were burning Denver from three.
Right.
I mean, they did shoot well from three, right? But it wasn't like a super
Majority
high
3
volume,
now.
and they made most of their free throws, which helps as well.
Right.
So, just in general, like I said, the rim is gonna always be there.
Yeah.
It's just again like Denver does have guys on the perimeter that are solid defensively. It's just if you can beat them, then like there's nothing Denver can do, right? Because again, like Aaron Gordon's a good defender, but he can't stop everybody, right? So if somebody gets to the rim and like it's not Aaron Gordon, I feel pretty confident about the chance to score. Because again, Jokic had a couple of blocks, but then there were also some possessions where like again we talked about it going into the series where he's going to concede baskets. Because again, he's not like a even though he's not a great rim protector or defender, he's not like a he's a pretty smart defensive
Yeah.
player
He's not
where
just
he's
gonna
not
nilly
going to
willy
miss a lot
foul.
of yeah, exactly, right? Like the type of fouls where, you tap a guy as he's going up instead of grabbing,
He's just gonna let him
versus
go.
like, yeah, just let him go. Exactly. So he did have 4 fouls.
Yeah.
But just in general, right? Like you said, I just feel like all LA has to do is get one in Denver, and that's probably going to make all the difference because Denver's not that good on the road, and
Nope.
they did, get that big Phoenix win on the road. To be fair, right? But it also was like, you know, a fractured Phoenix team that was missing, a couple of starters. Again, you still give Denver a ton of credit, but just in general, right? Like, I don't know. It just again, it kind of comes down to like, what are we going to get from the role players in addition to the stars? Because we know the stars are going to play pretty well,
Yep.
right? Like, I have no concerns about LeBron or AD or Jokic, playing poorly. Like, anybody can have a bad game, right? But all those guys are going to play well. It just comes down to the other guys, right? If everybody for Denver shows up, right, then Denver's probably going to win.
Right.
Um, especially if Jokic plays well and everybody contributes, right? That's kind of the formula usually to win playoff games, right? Now there's going to be some games, right, where he's going to have to backpack because everybody's not playing well, right? But just in general, those are the type of games where you pretty much should almost always win. And it was a one possession game in the last minute, so
Yeah.
it's like I wouldn't necessarily say that it doesn't move me at all, but at the same time, like I said, I still feel like I still lean towards like I think the Lakers can still win this. Just win, just
Sure.
make the adjustments that you need to make, win the next game, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to look at it, and I don't think we're changing our picks at all.
No.
And I guess we kind of have to look ahead. And then we're gonna get into the draft lottery because that did also occur today, and I think we have some pretty good commentary and just a sneak peek at where some guys are probably gonna go now that we know what the lottery order is gonna be and who has what pick and whatnot. But we got to start with the Heat Celtics. So game one of that series is going to be now today at 8:30 p.m. It's 12 o'clock now, but so it'll be Wednesday 8:30 p.m. and Boston has home court advantage on this one. So it'll be the Heat at Boston. And for me, I think this might be Tatum's year. This might be the year that Boston can potentially get a ring. So I'm gonna pick Boston on this one. I think we stated that I think we did our picks in the last episode, but
Yep.
just for the live viewers
Okay.
and whatnot, yeah, on the live viewers and whatnot, I'm going Boston. I think you also have Boston as well, but
Yeah.
you can't sleep on Miami, man. Like they're just such a gritty team. They fight for every bucket. They fight for every possession. They fight for everything. And you can't count Jimmy out. I'm sure he's going to give us another one of his great playoff performances. But is it going to be enough? I'm just worried about Miami's depth and the guys on this roster compared to Boston. Boston is just so deep. I know, and we say this every time we talk about them. Their depth is one of their strongest suits. But at the same time, Heat in 7? Nah, that's crazy. And you're a Boston fan. Why do you think it's Heat in 7? But just for me to continue, I don't know. I really like what Tatum has done this season, and I think he has what it takes to get past Miami. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, considering that Miami is such a great team, and they fight for everything, and they're proving to everyone that they should be here. But Boston likes to play from behind. Elaborate on that. But,
I think he's saying like that, like kind of like what we talked about in previous podcasts, where like sometimes it feels like they're kind of complacent.
okay,
Like,
complacent.
and,
Yeah.
and also like, I guess also in fairness, the last few Philly games they had the really slow starts, right?
Sure.
Like Tatum had the slow starts, I guess,
Okay.
but
I
I
think the
think
Heat
the Heat
won it.
won it more. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think Boston wants to win the series. I mean, obviously both teams want to win it,
Yeah.
but I just feel like Boston, kind of like Philly, is the more talented team. Obviously, I guess if you're a Boston fan, you might feel like, okay, that Boston Philly series should not have gone 7 games.
Sure.
But like, also the result kind of is the main thing that matters, right? It doesn't matter how many games it takes. I just feel like the thing with Miami is their offense was really good against Milwaukee, but against the Knicks, it felt like it took a big step back. Where
They
they were like
scored
just a
less
lot
too,
of
right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
way
Like it
less.
was just a lot of ugly games, right? Low scoring games, right? Where neither team could hit a shot. We know the Knicks offense is pretty bad as well. I just feel like Boston's offense, right, should in theory be too much for Miami. And also just like in general, like, I mean, again, other than Butler, like to me, this is a series where Tatum and Brown should be able to, get it going and kind of feast in a way to me, because like I don't see guys like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, like Duncan Robinson. Like, and again, these guys are fine players, but like I don't see those guys being able to stop Tatum and Brown. Tatum is inconsistent. I get it. Like he does have some up and down games, but
Doesn't
again, like the
everybody
game,
though?
yeah, like yeah, exactly. Like there are other guys that have had some up and down games, but like at the end of the day, like the game that mattered most was the game where he showed up,
When it
right? He
counts.
scores, yeah, 51 in an elimination game. Although it was close in the first half, which I think people, some people may forget, right? With Harden and Embiid playing bad in the first half as well. But
Yeah.
it just to me kind of just boils down to similar to how I felt about Boston and Philly, where I just feel like Boston's the more talented team. It wouldn't shock me if it was a semi-long series, because I feel like we're probably going to have a couple of Boston games where they run Miami off the floor. Probably going to have a couple of games where Jimmy Butler just carries the Heat to a win,
Yep.
right? And then after that, probably like 2 games where we have no idea what's going to happen, and that's probably going to determine the series, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be like a sweep, or even like I feel like this should probably be like. And again, I don't usually pick like game lengths for series. I
Yeah.
usually kind of just care more about who wins the
Who wins it?
series.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it would kind of surprise me if it was under 6 games, unless Miami just fizzles out and just can't do anything. Because Boston's defense, although it was really good in game 6 and 7, it hadn't really been there for much of the playoffs. Although in fairness, that double big lineup, right? They went away
That
from
one
for a
works.
while, and yeah, game 6 and 7 it worked out. Um, but again, like just in general, like if you're Boston, I mean, like again, like there's not a Jimmy Butler is the main guy you got to be concerned about, right? Like I don't feel like Bam I get Embiid had a bad game 7, but I just don't feel like Bam offensively should concern you as much. Right? Because again, like, free throw line and in, right, is pretty much where most of his offense comes from, right? He's not
Right.
going to kill you from three. So just in general, right? Like I don't feel that concerned about it if I'm Boston. Like, of course, they could lose the series if they have a couple of really awful games, right? Because again, their offense is very heavily predicated on threes. So if Boston has a poor 3-point shooting game, they're probably not going to win. Um, but just in general, right? Like I just feel like this Boston team is better, right? Like I would
Me
be
too.
kind of shocked if Miami beat Boston. Like I'm not saying it couldn't happen because a lot of things have happened this postseason that I didn't expect.
Right.
But I do feel like if Miami were to win, like that would be like a massive upset. Like to me, like if
I
you're
think that would be
Boston,
worse than the Milwaukee one.
yeah, kind of, because at least Milwaukee can use the excuse of Giannis was hurt.
Right.
Middleton wasn't 100%. So like, but like if Boston loses to Miami, like that would be pretty bad, right? Because and again, it's like they could have lost to Philly, but I don't know. Like I just would be kind of surprised that like you beat Philly in 7 games and then you lose to Miami because I feel like Philly is still probably a better team than Miami, even though like Jimmy Butler you trust more than Harden and
Yeah.
Embiid. I just feel like when it comes down to the supporting cast, like I just don't see how those guys stop Tatum and Brown. Because again, like I get Tatum and Brown, and especially Tatum has been kind of inconsistent, but I feel like hopefully I would think if you're Tatum, right, if you come off of that big game 7, obviously you're not going to score 50 every game, but that should give you a decent amount of momentum going into the next series, right? Because again, who on Miami is stopping Jason Tatum, in my opinion. And again, like it's also going to come down to the role players, right? Like Al Horford needs to be better.
Yeah.
Um, I guess, you know, White probably needs to be better,
Yeah.
right? We'll see if they play Grant Williams because in game 7, they really only played 6 guys. I mean, like, so it's like, we talked about, the depth of this Boston team, but they really haven't used that depth much, um, you know, at this point in the series. So I just feel like when it comes to this team, obviously, again, Tatum and Brown, that's your core. You need those guys to play well in order to win. But
Right.
I feel like Boston just has more guys that you can probably rely on at least somewhat. Because again, like I just don't know what Miami does with those guys, right? Like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, Duncan Robinson. I just feel like I don't see how those guys are going to be able to slow down Tatum and Brown, right? Like this should be a series where those two guys should be able to get downhill. Like Bam's obviously a great defender. But again, like, is he gonna be on Horford or is he gonna be on Robert Williams? I'm curious, right? Because again, like it's kind of like the AD effect where, if Bam's in the paint being able to kind of, do what he can do, then that makes it harder to score around the rim, obviously. Because we've seen what he can do defensively, for the most part. But after him, they don't really have anybody else you're worried about protecting the rim.
Right.
So it's like if Bam's out on the perimeter, or if he's not, or if he's like, just somewhere else in no man's land. I mean, Miami's not going to be able to do anything. So I just feel like Boston should win this series. I do feel like they're the better team. And I mean, like I said, if you're Boston, if you lose, kind of like if they had lost to Philly, same thing. Like you'd be like, how on earth did we lose to this team?
Right.
But we do know that there's going to be, I think, a couple of like just ridiculous Jimmy Butler games where he carries the heat to him. And like we know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
Because it happened last year against Boston. But I also feel like this Miami team, I still feel like is still worse than the one from last
It
year.
is.
Uh, it just feels like there's like these like they have some decent players, but then but a lot of these other guys are just a lot very up and down, right? Like Gabe Vincent, he's had some really good games, especially against Milwaukee, right? But then during the latter part of the Knicks series, he didn't really do much of anything. I mean, I get, defensively he's solid, right? But, again, similar to Max Strus, there are games where he plays really well, games where he doesn't play well, right? Kyle Lowry, he's had some good games and he's had some, bad ones. So I just feel like there's a lot less consistency with Miami. But in fairness, I do think one weakness for Boston is there are times where it feels like late in games they don't necessarily feel all that comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it when the ball feels like it's in Marcus Smart's hands a little too
Yes.
much in terms of like where it seems like every late game shot is he's taking.
Which is not the
Um,
play.
I don't think that's ideal. If you clean that up, yeah. But just in general, that's kind of the scary thing. Where to a close game, it does feel like Miami probably isn't there, but I don't know. Your mic. going haywire.
My mic was going haywire?
So
You said my mic was going
it's
haywire?
yeah, it's fine now.
Oh, okay.
But
Um,
yeah. So yeah, but I guess I don't know. You have anything else to add on there?
in terms of Boston, I just feel like, the difficulty is they're gonna probably have to end up picking their own, the poison, picking their poison. You have to either choose if you want to stop Tatum or Brown, and you have to also prepare for what happens if both of them have a great night. It's tough because it's kind of similar to the whole Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, I think thing, but it's weird. I don't know, but I don't know how to explain it because it's like it's similar to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, but on a lower scale. I feel like.
Similar. It's just the difference is because I think Boston has more reliable guys.
Hmm.
Like
It makes
you
it
don't
more
have to have
dangerous.
yeah, like Phoenix had to have Booker and Durant score like 80 points just
Right.
to make it competitive, right? Like it wasn't like we saw a lot of games where both of those guys went off and they, were blowouts, right? Like they were still relatively close games.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the concern if you're Phoenix, but if you're Boston, right, you have more guys. Like you have Brogdon, right? You have Horford who can have a, big game at times, right? You have even Marcus Smart, right? He's had some big games at different points. So you have other reliable options, I think. But, again, like it just kind of comes down to like I do think Tatum will have to be more consistent in this series.
Sure.
But again, at the same time, like I don't know. I just don't necessarily feel like Miami has as many go-to options.
No,
Again, they do
they
have a
don't.
lot of guys because they do play, I think, what 8, 9 guys. But again, a couple of those guys like Cody Zeller, I don't think he's gonna have like a huge impact against
Nope.
Boston. It's kind of like survive the non-Bam minutes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Um, but again, Lowry, if he plays well, he can be a difference maker. Um, but again, I don't know. I just don't know how many guys I can rely on for Miami to show up every night. And I just feel like they're gonna have a tough time on Tatum and Brown.
Yeah.
Because again, like unless they change the starting five, Kevin Love, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, right? Those three guys, right, are at different points are going to get switched on to Tatum or Brown, and I think it's going to be a tough time for those guys. Butler, I
Yeah.
think, can do fine, but again, he also has to carry the offense. So
Right.
just in general,
It's
I
it's
think
tough.
that's kind of the tough part. But I do like. I wouldn't say that Miami can't beat Boston. I still feel like Boston's the better team. I would be kind of surprised if Miami won.
Yeah.
Like like just in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I do think Miami's a good team. They should be respected. Um and you do have to give them a chance. It's kind of like even with Philly. Like I thought Boston would beat Philly, but I did give Philly a chance. And
Right.
again, it was a 7-game series, so clearly they had a chance to win, but I just feel like Boston is better. It just kind of comes down to like if you're Boston, like if it's close, you got to feel kind of nervous because it
Mm-hmm.
feels like in a lot of these close games, Boston sometimes makes these weird mistakes. But
Mm-hmm.
again, Tatum plays really well, and again, he's not going to average 50, obviously. But if he has consistently solid performances, I think Boston's going to win.
Yeah. And then, just to reiterate, I think, um, the thing is you can't underestimate the Heat, but I think Boston is better in general. Um, and I guess to move on, we've got some news, but first we want to get into the lottery results. So, I guess the big headliner is the Spurs won the, Wemby sweepstakes, so I guess like, the full selection order, I guess we'll go from top to
Yeah, sure.
bottom. Top to bottom, I think is cool. So, obviously San Antonio, they won. They got the number
Mm-hmm.
one pick. And that's a big deal because, now Wemby's going, to I think it's the consensus that Wemby's going to San Antonio. Um,
Yeah.
I think he's the undisputed number one pick, generational talent off rip for sure. And it's gonna be wild because San Antonio has some guys. They got Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones. So it's interesting. No Primo anymore, but their core was pretty lit. But it's only getting better now. I think you'd much rather have Wembenyama over freaking Josh Primo, but that's a talk for another day. But so yeah, Wemby is officially on San Antonio. What do you think of that? Because I enjoy it. You kind of did say that would be kind of interesting. I think you
Yeah.
said that in
I
the
mean,
podcast.
yeah. I mean, it is kind of interesting with the draft lottery. It's kind of just kind of wild, like when you look at the draft lottery odds and how they've really changed the course of a lot of these teams' futures, right? Because
Mhm.
again, like obviously we look at the Spurs, obviously as the winner of the night because they get Victor Wembanyama, right? They get the chance to draft another, generational big man, right? 1997, they take Tim Duncan number one. 1987, they took David Robinson, the Admiral, number one.
Mhm.
Right. So obviously you get another chance. You get another, great talent as a big. Of course, you also have the interesting factor, right? Where I think, Tony Parker, right, obviously played for the Spurs. He's from France. Um, I think he owns the team, or at least owns part of the team that Victor was playing on. So obviously there's an interesting connection there, right? So it's a great pick. It's a great day for San Antonio, in my opinion, because again, like you said, I think he's the obvious number one pick,
Mhm.
right? When you look at his size, right, at 7'5", his length, his shooting, his athleticism, the sky's the limit for him. Obviously, you'd like for him to get probably stronger, right? Because he's a little too thin.
Yeah.
But again, like,
And an NBA
obviously,
program will help him with that though, for sure.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because you look at Chet, he's, I think, filled out a little bit since he was drafted, in some of the pictures we've seen
Mhm.
online. But then also like when we look at the lottery odds, like I talked about, then you look at Detroit and it's like, wow, like that's kind of rough because with the flattened lottery odds, right? In the past, if you had the worst record, you had a 25% chance of winning the number one pick.
Yeah.
Now it's like 14%.
Yeah. It's like
So
14.5 or something like that.
yeah,
Weird
yeah,
number.
14 and a half, something
Yeah.
like that, right? So that
Yeah.
basically means you got like an 86% chance of not getting the number one pick.
Yeah.
So if you're Detroit, you're like, man, we had the worst record, and all we do is get rewarded with the number 5 pick. I mean,
Yeah.
like that's cool, right? I think the 3 worst records, what was it? It was I think it was Detroit, Spurs, and I think it was Houston,
Houston.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Obviously Charlotte, that was kind of interesting because, it was down to the wire where, I talked about on the podcast how I did not want him to go to Charlotte.
Right.
It was this close, right? They get the number 2 pick, right? So, somebody else I'm sure will have a ton of fun in Charlotte. Um,
Yeah. I guess that's kind of a good segue to, the number 2 pick and that's Charlotte. But I
right.
I'm not going to lie, I think they're going Scoot here.
Yeah, I think so.
I
It's going to be
uh,
kind of interesting to see the
yeah.
combination of him and LaMelo Ball. But again, we also don't know with Charlotte because, just in general, they've made a lot of really strange picks.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't had like a ton of like number one, you know, picks, even though they've been pretty bad the last
Yeah.
15 years. But like, you look at some of the guys that they've drafted. I mean, like, they took what was it? I think it was Michael Kidd Gilchrist,
Yeah.
number 2 overall, right back in that Anthony Davis draft when they could have had, what, like Bradley Beal, or other guys like that. I mean, like just in
Yeah.
general, like that. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think there was that other draft, right, where they took Frank Kaminsky,
Oh
right? I
my
think it
god, I
was like
forgot about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Holy
exactly. And
crap.
I think it was especially bad because I believe it was a scenario where Boston offered them multiple first round picks in order to trade up, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Boston wanted Justice Winslow, but Charlotte turned it down. So they turned down the option at multiple picks, and then they took Frank Kaminsky. So
It is what
yeah,
it is.
that's not
Yeah, they have a
yeah,
rough
exactly.
history with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They took Adam Morrison, number 2 overall, right? Or yeah, I think he was a top lottery pick, right? And I think he was a diabetic, so
Yeah.
not trying to be funny or
Right, right,
anything. I
right.
think that's actually what happened, right? And
Yeah.
he was a good college player, but he didn't translate over to the pro. So I don't know who Charlotte's going to pick number 2,
Yeah.
right? They could pick Scoot, but it wouldn't shock me if they went a completely different direction and they're just like, let's just take somebody else because
Yeah.
you just don't know with Charlotte. Obviously, the Lamelo Ball pick was solid. Again, he's a pretty good player. But outside of that, they don't have a great track record. Like even
Sure.
with Miles Bridges, right? He was good, right? Of course, he had some other issues, but then it's also like they actually drafted Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and they traded him to the
Uh
Clippers
yeah,
and took
it's
Bridges,
rough.
and it's like I just don't necessarily know if I can trust Charlotte with these decisions. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they could take Scoot, but then it's like maybe they just take somebody else, and it's like, what are you doing? I mean,
Yeah.
again, like the Mellow Ball pick was solid, right? But other than that, I mean, I guess Mark Williams was solid.
Yeah, it's a good
He
pick.
seemed fine,
That was
but
what, last
and
year?
again, I guess yeah, and I guess
Mhm.
Mitch Kupchak, the GM, he's done a better job than I guess whoever was in charge before.
Sure.
But again, it's not saying much. So I don't know
Book
what
night
Charlotte's
hadn't
gonna do.
really panned out either. Book night, it's just weird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's just I don't know. Like I said, I think it would have been absolute worst case scenario if he had gone to Charlotte.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess moving on. who was the next
It
pick,
was
right? That was
Portland. It was Portland.
yeah,
Um,
that was another. Yeah, go on.
sorry, I just want to say, because
Yeah,
we're not gonna make it all about Wemby, but I do want
right.
to say this with Portland. They are in probably the hardest position ever, I think, with this third pick because they can do a lot with it, but they can also easily screw this one up. And if I'm them, you have to take the risk at this point. And I would probably pick one of the Thompson twins, probably Amon. I think he's probably gonna have a better. I think his potential is higher than Brandon Miller. I know everybody's really high on
Which
Brandon
one?
Miller. Amon
Which Thompson?
Thompson, Amon.
Okay.
That's the guard. So
Yeah,
they might be both. They might both be guards.
I think they're both. I think.
The I think
I
the
think
I
one
think
of the.
the I think Asur might be the guard. He might be a guard and a forward, but I think Amon is a
Yeah,
pure guard.
they're both identical twins, but one of them is a little taller
Yeah.
than the other. So I mean, like,
So I think Amon is like 6'7", so he's kind of like a two guard, if you would. But I think you probably have to go Amon Thompson because I feel like his upside is really high, and I think it's higher than Brandon Miller. I think Brandon Miller, the best comparison that you can have with him, is kind of like a Keegan Murray kind of guy. A guy who's going to come into the league ready for it. He Brandon Miller shot like around 40% from three on like 7 attempts per game, so that's pretty good. You know, and he was a knockdown free throw shooter as well. So I feel like he's really deadly on his spot ups, and he can really influence the game. But I don't know if that's what Portland needs. Portland needs somebody who could potentially take up the Dame Lillard mantle if he leaves or whatever the case may be, or just give him some extra help. And I know Dame is a ball dominant player, but it would probably help to have a secondary ball handler.
yeah, that's kind of how I feel. Where I'm like, if I'm Portland, I'm going for the talent upside
Exactly.
because I just think like again with Lillard, even though he had a great season, right? Like obviously you have to look at his age, and obviously like you also have to look at maybe we trade him down the line, or just in general, right? Like how many great years is he gonna have, left to go? So I think so like to me, and again, Portland was not a good team last year, so I'm
Yeah.
like I don't think they're in a position where it's like let's just take the guy that's like the right fit, that's ready to play. Like, get the guy with the biggest upside, I think. Because again, like I don't think you're gonna be a good team anyways, probably next year. So to me, why not get the guy with the most talent? Because it's like because if Lillard's gone and you're stuck with the guy like who has a solid floor but a low ceiling, like then it's like what are we really doing at that point? So
Yeah.
to me, I think you pick the upside guy.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
And like, I think the best way to sum up, what position Portland is in is because, here's the thing. Here's some context on the Thompson twins. They didn't go to college. So they went with the overtime elite league, which I think these
Yeah.
guys will be the first guys to come into the league through that route. So that's a huge gamble as it is. But, the dichotomy is passing on them in the top 5 might be even riskier than that. So I don't know. It's rough. I feel like
think it's hard.
I know, but I feel like passing on them might be riskier than taking them. I feel like that's what I would say in regards to
Yeah.
Portland on that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because there's a world where like they have a lot of upside, but then there's also a world where like maybe it just pans out because it doesn't pan out because they're also not like great outside shooters.
yeah,
So it's like, and it's like if you're gonna be a guard that has the ball in your hands, you got to be able to knock down, jumpers consistently. I think, and again, of course, you can always develop one, but again, it's like you got to look at what it's like when you first get into the league because it's not very often that you are a bad outside shooter and you turn into a really good one. Like usually you might have a guy that's like mediocre as an outside shooter
sure,
that gets better and becomes a good one, but it's very rare that a guy is like a bad shooter or like a complete non-shooter and all of a sudden figures it out and becomes a really good like that happened with Jason Kidd, but again that's like one guy
right,
and it took him almost towards the end of his career to figure that out. So just like and again and he's a point guard. So like just in general, it's tough to figure out, right? Because again, this is why drafting is really tough because you have a lot of guys that, you know, have a lot of upside and, sometimes on paper they can be like the obvious pick, but then there's other times where it's like it just doesn't work. And like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how, whether or not they pan out from that route, right? Because the overtime elite is a relatively new thing. So
yep,
it's just like, it's going to be interesting to see like if the guys that come out of there are actually legit because I mean, they seem like very talented players, very athletic.
they're
Like you
very
said, got great
flashy,
size. Yeah, great size for their positions. So I
fast
think
too.
there is, Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of upside there. So again, like if you're Portland, we talked about this in a podcast a while back where they're kind of like in no man's land, where it feels like they're probably just not good enough to compete and
Sure.
contend. But like then it's also like, you know, like at the same time, because you have Lillard, like you don't want to necessarily just tank every year because you have Lillard on there and
Right.
he wants to compete. So but I just feel like in general, I think you go with the upside, right? Because like Sacramento was in a different thing where they were bad,
Exactly.
but like their mindset was like, you know what, we got a decent amount of guys, like we got Fox, we got Sabonis, we haven't made the playoffs in almost 20 years, so let's compete, right? And Keegan Murray and so far has ended up being really good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Does he get significantly better? Probably not, right? But even this version is still a good player
Right.
that's clearly helped out a winning team. So like that panned out. But again, it's like you just never know. And again, he's also what? He wasn't like a 19-year-old rookie. So
Right.
he's a little bit older, right? So
Yeah.
like, just in general, if you're Portland, you're a bad team. And it's like, again, I just don't think you're probably going that far with Lillard there. And it's not even because of him. You just don't have a good team. So
Yeah.
like I go with the upside if I'm Portland.
Sure. And that's the thing that you have to weigh. You have to weigh the floor and the ceiling, which is basically, the what you're going to come in as, or, what you can become. And that,
Yeah,
like you said, that's the hard part about drafting.
right. I
Um
guess
what's up?
we can go into the next team, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Houston.
Yeah, it was Houston. So did you want to go through all the teams, or, just like certain ones?
I'd say we could probably stop around like 10 because I think
Okay,
like
that's
past
fine.
10, like
Sure, sure, sure. So
yeah, but
Houston, you know,
yeah,
yeah, did you want to start with Houston or not really? Or did you want
guess
me to
I'll
kick it
take
off? Okay,
yeah, and then you can get into the players.
sure.
So obviously Houston rep by their new coach Ime Udoka. They were kind of a team where it feels like what
Sorry, I just blanked and flashback to when I was watching the lottery. It's just funny
oh
how they
yeah
panned to the people and like they they said their names and they kind of just stared out into space,
yeah
and it
Colin
was just
Sexton.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah, Sexton didn't look like he was having a great
No.
time, but understandable. But
Yeah.
yeah, Houston, this is another team where I feel like this is kind of a quote unquote loser of the night because
Sure.
again, this was another team that I think had one of the three worst records. You could, again, we've talked about it a lot this year where they were a mess, they were awful, they were bad in pretty much every sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you get rewarded, or you don't really get rewarded with the fourth pick, right? You
Yeah.
don't get Wembanyama, you don't even really get Scoot. You may not even get one of the Thompson twins, right? Again, it's not even like this is a bad draft. This has a lot of solid players. It's just if you're Houston, you're looking for the home run, right? Because like their plan clearly, from all reports, it sounds like right. We get Wembanyama or one of these top picks. We get a ton of cap space, and we sign, some veteran guys, maybe a Harden, maybe a Middleton, maybe somebody like that, and then we go from there. Because I don't think they have their pick next year. So it's like this is kind of a scenario where you kind of needed some luck to go your way
Right.
and get that guy because you're not getting a guy like that next year, right?
Nope.
So like, that's kind of an unfortunate situation to be in. So like again, like you still have solid players to pick up, right? But you know, not getting Scoot or Victor, and you had the worst record in basketball or close to it. I think they had the second or third worst. That's pretty rough, So to
Yeah.
me, they're definitely one of the losers of the night.
Yeah. They might be the one of the bigger losers along with Detroit. Um and in
Which is the next team.
exactly, but in terms of who I think, would probably fit well with them and who they could potentially pick, I would have to go with Brandon Miller. I think, Brandon Miller being outside of the top 4 is kind of a crime. No pun intended. Holy crap. But, it is bad that I don't, he shouldn't fall out of the top 4. And that's mainly, like I said, due to his knockdown shooting ability. I think he's great on spot ups. He can really flex the defense, especially when he runs off of screens and hits shots. But I think, his potential and ceiling really like pretty much comes down to, can you trust him with the ball in his hands? So like, when he's dribbling around, ISOing, can he even get to a spot? That's the biggest issue with him because it seems like, he doesn't have a ton of speed. And he's not, a huge driver. He can't separate from his man, so he's more of a knockdown kind of guy. So that's the question mark. But I feel like with development, and I think Udoka is the right guy for that. And I feel like Houston is probably a good place for that as well. Because I feel like if you're Houston, you don't want to pick up another guard unless it's Scoot, because you do have Jalen Green and Michael Porter Jr. or wow, Michael Porter Jr. Kevin Porter Jr. Excuse me. So you have both of those guys who are kind of similar in the play style. And then you also have Jabari Smith Jr. So I feel like getting another forward would probably help you um, help this roster look a little bit better. And I think there's still potential for it because you also have Sengun as well at the 5. So I feel like Brandon Miller going to Houston would probably be the best fit, but who knows what they'll do. And I guess to move on, we got to get into Detroit. This is a huge miss for them. What'd you say?
Yeah, yeah, Ben Wallace,
Yeah,
repping
yeah, he didn't look too
Detroit.
happy either.
No.
Yeah, but
Um, but
it
yeah,
was weird.
I guess it's another scenario because again, like we talked about it, where it's like if you're Detroit, right, like you needed this to be a home run, right? Because again, like you look at Detroit, they don't really have a ton of great talent. I mean,
Right.
obviously you have Cade Cunningham, who's really good, obviously. You have Jaden Ivey, who had a pretty good, solid rookie season, so you got a good backcourt. Jalen Duren seems like he's been a pretty good steal in that draft, right?
Hmm.
But then after that, I mean, like like Killian Hayes, right? Like he seems like he's not been that great.
Nope.
Maybe he gets better, but it feels like that pick was probably, a miss.
It's a bus.
Um,
It's looking like a bus right now.
yeah, I mean, Bagley again, okay, right? But again, not really a whole lot there. James Wiseman, kind of a similar thing. Seems like that pick may not necessarily be all that great. Um, but just in general, yeah, like you said with Detroit, I mean, 17-65, the absolute worst record in the NBA, and you drop from 1 to 5. I mean, that's just killer. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just brutal. But again, this was kind of a situation where you and I talked about on the podcast where we're like, we don't really want Victor to go here either.
Right.
And it's not because anybody on this podcast, like quote unquote, hates Detroit. It's
Right.
just like to me, I'm just like, they don't have a whole lot going for them. They've made some decent moves. It seems like the front office has made a decent job. Has done a decent job the last year or so. But it's like I feel like the Spurs might be the best.
It's a safe
One of the
place.
better.
Safe
It
space.
might be one of the better infrastructures. Although, in fairness, like since like Kawhi's been gone, the Spurs honestly have been pretty awful as well. In my opinion, I mean, like again, they had the couple of seasons right with DeRozan and
DeRozan.
Aldridge
Yeah.
where they were like just okay, right? But like then also like they also had some misses. Like they drafted like you said Josh Primo, right? Who even before his issues, right, didn't really to me seem that great.
He was
Seemed like
okay.
that pick. Yeah, that pick seemed kind of like a stretch, I guess. Um, but just in general, right? Like you do have Pop there, so it's just like I don't know. I don't know. I personally didn't really want him to go to San Antonio either, but I guess I'd rather him go there than Detroit. But yeah, Detroit's definitely the big loser of the night for
Yeah.
sure.
I would have preferred him go to Houston. That was my number one place or my number one destination for him.
Yeah, and these next ones, I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on because
Sure.
just like in general, right? Like these are just like, once you get past 5, right? I mean, like, like obviously you could have some good picks, but just in general, right? Like these next ones are kind of like what you would expect based off their record,
Sure.
right? Orlando, right? Obviously with at number 6, right. I think that's their own pick because they actually got 2
Yes.
lottery picks in the draft, right? They got
Hmm.
6 and 11. 11, I believe, came from Chicago in the
Yep.
Vucevic trade. It seems
Hmm.
like that trade was kind of a
It
L
wa-
for
it was
Chicago.
bad.
It feels
It's
like.
bad. It's bad.
Great for Orlando, but not great for Chicago,
Yeah.
right? You get Wendell Carter Jr.
Hmm.
and multiple lottery picks, right? Franz Wagner, I think that would have been Chicago's pick.
Yeah.
And also you factor in again, you're also going to have the 11th pick, whomever this is. So that's pretty rough. Indiana, right, with the 7th pick again, not really much of a surprise there, right? They earlier in the season when they were healthy, they looked like a decent playoff team, right? But then Halliburton gets hurt, right?
Hmm.
It all turns to garbage, and then obviously they kind of mail it in during the second half of the season.
Yeah, and in
Um,
regards to Indiana, I did want to talk about them just really briefly. I
yeah,
think this is probably where the other Thompson brother is going to go. I think Osir Thompson is probably going to end up here. I think he's the one who's they're pretty much the same height basically. I think it's like an inch or two difference. Um, but they both really can't shoot, which is the unfortunate thing. But
exactly.
I think this is probably a spot where he can probably come off the bench in this situation. I feel like, since he's more of the guard forward kind of brother, I feel like, this is probably the best fit for him. Because if you look at the teams that we talked about before, I don't think he would fit in the Orlando scheme, and I don't think he would fit in Detroit, considering, both of those guard rooms are pretty hefty. Even, Houston, you just don't want to oversaturate your guard room, and I think, that would probably end up hurting all of those teams if they drafted him. So I think he'll fall
Yeah.
right at to number 7.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, for me, like, I feel like you usually like, like some of these teams, I don't feel like are in like a position where they
Right.
can say like, well, we can't draft this guy because we have this guy, right? Like Houston can't be like, well, we can't take, a point guard because we have Kevin Porter Jr. And I'm
Right.
like, I don't think you can do that. But
Right.
yeah, just in general, I understand like certain play like once you're at this point in the draft, right? Like then there's probably not as many like big stars, which
Yeah.
again, there always are some, right? Because it's even when you look at previous draft, the number one pick isn't always the best player in the
No.
draft.
Like Jordan was
You
what, the
know,
third pick, right?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elijah Wan was one. I think Sam Bowie was
Yeah.
number two, and then Jordan was third. So
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Or even in 2014, which was a bad draft, right? That was the Giannis one. He was like 15.
Yeah.
Um, but just in general, yeah. Moving on, number 8, your Wizards.
Yep.
They get the 8th pick. I don't know, kind of a situation where I feel like they probably should have tanked sooner.
Yeah.
Um,
We
because I
could have
just
gotten Wemby, if you want me to be honest.
because I just feel like, I mean, they had stretches where they were decent, but I feel like I didn't feel like that they were probably going like once they lost, I think like 10 games in a row. To me, that was the point where it's like, okay, you
Once
guys,
Beal went down, we should have
yeah.
started tanking.
Because I think, yeah, they lost 10 in a row, and then they had like these weird stretches where then they would win like 5, 6, 7 in a row. And I'm like, that shouldn't be happening. Because like by
What's the
that point, I'm
goal
like,
here?
exactly. So I mean, obviously, there'll always be like somebody to take, there. But again, it's like you had back, the last draft, right? You took Johnny Davis. Again, rookie year, right? But wasn't necessarily great. And again, maybe he's got potential. Maybe down the road he gets better. But I feel like this is the one where like you can't screw this one up. Like you can't have back to back drafts where you have
Yeah.
top 10 picks and neither guy really gives you anything.
Yeah.
So
Do
like
you
that's
want my
kind of
opinion on it? Do you want
yeah, sure.
cuz I would probably go Jerice Walker. I think he's pretty solid. He's about
Forward, right?
yeah, he's 6'8". Um and I mean, he's pretty decent, I feel like, he's 6'8" with a 7'2" wingspan, so he's kind of like a power forward. 240 pounds. And I think that's something that we lack is physicality, strength, and size. I feel like, having a young guy like that with a motor like that, I think that's something that would probably excite me as a Wizards fan. And I feel like, he was a good one-on-one scorer in high school, but in college, I think, he kind of had to take a step back due to the system that he was in because I think he was at Houston and they weren't that great of a team, but they're all right. But
Yeah.
um, I feel like there's a lot of underlying offensive skill potential
Yeah.
beneath this player. So that's just my take on that.
Number 9, Utah. Obviously that was kind of an interesting team this season where they were pretty competitive for most of the year, right? Then like some of these other teams, right, they phoned it in at the end, right? A lot of guys were sitting out with injuries.
Yeah.
But again, like if you're Utah, right, you got to still be, happy, I guess, with having a lottery pick. But again, it just feels kind of weird because it's like to me, it's like, if you were bad from the start, then you could have had a top pick, but instead you're at number 9, right? And again, I guess like considering Markkinen was really good, Sexton seems like he's been pretty solid. Walker Kessler was awesome his rookie year. Seems like you kind of have an established group of guys, so maybe you don't necessarily need to have like the home run pick. But again, like if you're Utah, I mean, is that going to happen again next year? I mean,
Right.
it could, right? But I mean, like at the same time, it may not. So you would like to have a slightly higher pick, but I don't know. It's just kind of just weird that we had so many teams that were competing for most of the season, even though we heard so much talk about teams that were gonna just tank from the beginning, from the get go. But you really didn't see a ton of tanking until late down the stretch of the season. So it's just kind of an interesting scenario where, again, if you're Utah, you're happy that your team, I guess, was close to being a playing team, but at the same time, it's like could have had a top 5 pick,
Right.
right? And we thought they were going to be a bot. And again, maybe they just weren't bad enough. Because in fairness, right, we thought going into the season, most people thought that this was a bottom 5 roster, but they ended up being way better than expected because they did have a lot of guys that were better than expected. Like I said, Walker Kessler, Laurie Markkinen for sure, most improved player. So just again, this is kind of the point where you're just kind of in that strange land, right? Where it's like most of the top guys are probably gone. So you're gonna have to get pretty creative with who you pick.
Right.
And again, like Utah, because they've been a playoff team the last few years, they haven't really had a lottery pick in a little bit. So they don't have like a lot of like history in the last few years in terms of picking lottery guys. So I don't know who they pick here, right? Because
Yeah.
some of the other guys that they picked like late in the lottery, right? Like Udoka Azubuike didn't really pan out. And a couple other guys, right? Like they don't really have like a lot of high draft picks that they drafted themselves. So
Sure.
I don't really know what to expect from them in this year's draft.
Yeah.
But
It's
I
kind of
do think
funky.
like yeah, but it does feel like maybe you could find like another forward so that way like you don't have to have like three bigs, right? Because they were starting like Olenek, Markkanen, and Kessler all together, and it worked, I guess.
Hmm.
But it just feels like you'd like to have like some like a more of like a true wing type guy.
Yeah. Lake show, no
Um,
show. What do you have to
I
say
mean, we
about
talked
that,
about it.
Laker fan?
Yeah, we talked about that an hour ago. I mean,
Yeah.
like, it was kind of a no-show in the first half, but the second half, we talked about it. There were real adjustments that made it a game, and it
Right.
wasn't just Denver taking the foot off the gas. Obviously, if you're Lakers, you're not happy that you're down 1-0, but at the same time, if you take those adjustments from the second half and bring it into game 2, you can win that game.
Yeah.
And also, like,
Just come out
and you
strong.
just have yeah, exactly. And you have to give credit to Denver for hitting some big momentum shots, right? Because
Sure.
again, every time the Lakers made it a game, right, then the Lakers, then Denver would hit some ridiculous shot, right? Or even like just, decent shots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Like it wasn't that Denver took their foot off the gas. They made real adjustments,
Sure.
right? Like we mentioned, putting Rui on Jokic and allowing AD to play in the middle of the floor defensively. Right, they took out D'Lo and put Schroeder in there, right? For some more defense. They attacked the basket, right, and got guys in foul trouble because again, Denver can't stop LA at the rim. So if they're attacking the rim, playing downhill, then they can do it. But they also have to get stops because the
Yeah.
first half they were not getting stops. That was one of the worst defensive performances they've had in the postseason. But also, like when you start three smaller guards, right, you're going to get punished.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, yeah, in the chat, yeah, we talked about those guys are X factors for Denver because Denver is not like a super deep team, so they're gonna need guys like Bruce Brown and KCP to play well. If everybody for Denver plays well, they're probably gonna win almost every game, right?
Yes.
But you could argue that for most teams, right? If every key contributor for your team is playing well, you're probably gonna win. And again, Denver offensively has the talent to be able to win games, but
Right.
um, and then going back to I guess like the 10th pick, right? Dallas, right? They pretty fortunate, right? Because if it had left the top 10, if it was 11 or lower, it would have gone to New York, right? But they just eked it out with the top 10 pick. And there's some flexibility there, right? If you're Dallas, because
Hmm.
you can either keep the pick and, draft a guy within the top 10, or maybe you can dangle it, in a trade to bring back some guys. Because we
Right.
know, like, you have Luca, you have, a top, tier player, superstar, and, you're trying to win games with him. So there's a lot of flexibility here. So I guess you could also kind of semi put Dallas in the winner camp because
Sure.
they kept their pick. Obviously, like they'd be a big time winner if it was like a top 5 pick.
Right.
But I don't think that was necessarily realistic, right?
Mm-mm.
Because like just in terms of the low odds, we've seen teams, have low odds of getting picks. Like I think it was 2019, right, where the Lakers were projected to get 11 and they got 4.
Yeah. Do you
Do you
think
think guys
Kyrie's
think
gonna
they,
extend it?
my guess is yeah.
You think
But
so?
like I don't necessarily I guess when we say extension, we mean like is Dallas gonna re-sign him?
Yeah.
I mean, the issue is that there's not really a lot of other teams with cap space. You know what I mean? So it's like they don't really have much of a choice. I mean,
Yeah, and they
now
did
maybe
give
it's
up
a
some
sign and
stuff
trade.
too. So,
Yeah. Like maybe it's a sign and trade where he goes somewhere else, right?
right.
Like, maybe it's something with Phoenix, right? Or something like that. But at the same time, it's like that's my thing is like, where's he gonna go? Because there's not a lot of teams with cap space, and the
Right.
teams that have cap space, I don't think would necessarily want him, right? Like I think the Spurs, I think are a team with cap space, maybe, and like, do they? I don't think they would want Kyrie Irving.
No, he
So
doesn't
like,
fit that culture, man.
yeah, exactly. Like most of the teams, right? Houston has cap space, but again, like, does Houston want him? I mean, like maybe,
They
but I
want
mean,
Harden apparently.
yeah, like I don't know. Like I just don't feel like there's a lot of options for him to go places.
Right.
So it's just like I don't know. Like I feel like he probably does resign, but like, is he gonna be there like long term? Right? Like, is he gonna be there 2, 3 seasons from now? I don't
I was
know.
thinking
He just
Kyrie to the Suns, what Jamal just said.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like it could happen. It's just you have to factor in,
Crazily
you know,
bad. What are you talking about? If Kyrie was on the Suns, I think that would be great. But
yeah.
it's
But
probably a money
personally,
thing.
Yeah, but yeah, personally for me, if I'm Phoenix, I would kind of maybe look to do what the Lakers did, where you move Chris Paul and Ayton and try to
Yep.
get multiple role player pieces. I don't think you necessarily have to go star hunting.
Sure.
Because again, the issue for Phoenix is the lack of depth. And again, Kyrie's another guy who's always hurt. So you have to bank on, and again, every team has to bank on their stars being healthy. But if you're Phoenix, you're already like in a weird spot because your stars are not reliable health wise, right? Like, Durant gets hurt a lot. If you get Kyrie, he gets hurt a lot, right? They were hurt a lot when they were together in Brooklyn. Um, so it's just like, and it's not going to get, it's not going to get much better. So yeah, but just in general, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I feel like for the Dallas thing, I just feel like they don't have many other options. Because again, if he leaves,
Yeah.
I mean, where's he gonna go? And like
Yeah.
Dallas, like if they let him walk, they're not gonna have cap space to really make up for that either. So I mean, I feel like he probably resigns,
Right.
but like, is it gonna be the contract he wants? I don't know about that. We'll just have to see. I just don't know where else he would go.
Yeah.
But at the very least, if you're Dallas, you do have to be happy that you kept your pick because again, it does give you flexibility either to move it, for somebody else, which you certainly could do if you're Dallas, if you're trying to win, or maybe if there's a player you like in the draft, you can take them, and then kind of work with that. I mean, again, if you're Dallas, you need an influx of talent because they
Yeah.
did not have enough talent last year.
What's up, Mo?
Yeah, pretty much Elmar Cuban. Yeah, because it all goes back to the Brunson thing where they could have re-signed him for much less, and they didn't. And then again, they were in a position where they still could have re-signed him, albeit for more, and then they didn't, and they
Yeah.
let him walk.
And now he's
And
hooping.
he goes, yeah, and he's going to New York playing great, and they didn't really replace him with anything because they really couldn't. And then it's in a position where you panic and you make a panic move and you get Kyrie, and it's not his fault, right? But you gave up, you know, decent pieces to, get a star player and it didn't work. Now
Yeah.
you kind of have to figure out how to fix that. And that's a tough position to be in, right? If you're a team like Dallas where you actually had like a and again, like I feel like they did overachieve last season going to the Western Conference Finals, but like there is a world where like if they had just played it smart and, not let Brunson go and make some other moves around the margins, they would have made the playoffs, I feel
Right.
like, right?
Yeah.
Like if you had Brunson, with Luca, and you do the Christian Wood thing, like you could still move like a Dinwiddie, and somebody else for, something, right? But like instead, you lost out on Brunson and you made a panic move, and that's kind of why they're where they're at right now. Like just
Yeah.
bad decisions, and after making one bad decision, then you have a downward spiral because then you make even more bad decisions.
Right.
So that's kind of where they are, I guess. But at the very least, if you're Dallas, you got to be happy that you kept your pick. And then I guess like just a quick thing, Orlando at 11. Again, that pick was from the Bulls, right? And that pick is in Orlando's hands because it wasn't in the top 4. Oklahoma City, right? They get the 12th pick, right? So they continue to add young talent. Toronto at 13, and then New Orleans at 14, right? So, that's pretty much your lottery
Yeah.
picks right there. Like we said, right? Obviously big winner San Antonio, for sure, right? Charlotte is also technically a winner, right? Because they jumped up in the lottery odds because I think they were like somewhere around maybe 5-ish
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then Portland, obviously, you get a top 3 picks. You got to be happy about that, right? And then obviously, losers, Houston, Detroit. I think those are the pretty obvious ones right there because they should have, if it was based off of just record, right, they would have gotten, one and the first and second picks, but instead they have to deal with 4 and 5. Crazy thing is guard wise, Mavs are fine. They need a good starting 4 and 5. Now imagine Kai package Aiton and CP. I mean the Chris Paul thing at this point in his career, it like I do feel like he needs somebody to kind of like control some of the offense like
Yeah.
for him because I just think at this point in his career you just can't rely on him
Right.
over the course of a regular season. Aiton, I almost feel like I'm kind of out on because it just feels like since he got his big contract, he just has not,
He doesn't care, bro.
been the yeah, he just has not been the guy that I think he needs to be. Because again, like he's a good offensive player. He's got really good touch, great hands, great size and mobility, right? But again, like with Durant and Kyrie, or excuse me, not Kyrie, with Durant and Booker, I mean,
Yeah.
like you're just not like you're gonna have nights obviously where you go off on offense, but more often than not, you're gonna have to do the little things. And if you're not gonna do the little things, that's probably not gonna work,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, if I'm Phoenix personally, I'm taking the Laker route and I'm moving Paul and Aiton if I can for role players because
Okay. Yeah.
because
I think
again
that's
we
smart.
saw the lack of because we saw the lack of depth and how it hurt Phoenix down the stretch, right? Because Booker and Durant had to play 40 plus minutes every night and there was going to be a stretch, right, where they were probably going to run out of gas, and that's what happened against Denver. So
Yeah.
that's personally what I would do.
Yeah.
And then I guess to kind of wrap up the stream because we are going kind of way over what we
Yeah.
thought we were going to do. I think
Sure.
we're at 84 minutes, right? So we're
Yeah,
almost
we're
at an
at like
hour
an
and a
hour and a
half.
half. Yeah.
I guess quick thing: Doc Rivers, right, head coach for the 76ers, fired, let go. Um, knew it was coming, right? We obviously, you heard the post game interviews with Harden, right, where he said our relationship is okay.
Yeah.
But even without that, like you knew it was coming, right? We saw all the other coaches get fired: Monty Williams, um, Mike Budenholzer, Nick Nurse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all these guys, right, who did have success at different points, right? But they couldn't get it done this year, so they were let go. So there
Right.
was no world to me in which Doc Rivers survives and the other guys did not.
Right.
I do think he has the ability. I do think, like, they said reportedly, Chris Haynes said that he would still like to continue coaching. And I think because he is, a big name, kind of a legacy guy, right, where he's been coaching for a while, he'll probably get another opportunity if he wants to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who necessarily.
Right.
Um, but just got a call from Dwight Howard. He told me to slide to Taiwan. That's funny.
Yeah, he's been
Yeah,
recruiting, bro. He's trying to create the Avengers of Taiwan.
yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, just in general, like I said, we knew it was coming, right? 3 seasons as the Philly coach. Each time they get eliminated in the second round and in different ways, right? I mean, the first year he was there, I think that was the year that they lost to was it Atlanta? Yeah, they lost to Atlanta, right in the
Yeah.
second round where they had like, the big games where they were up, by a decent amount and blew it at the end, right?
Yep.
Lost to Atlanta in 7. Then last year, right, they lose in the second round to Miami in 6, right? Um, and again, like another scenario where it feels like Philly should have won that series, but they didn't.
Right.
And then this year, right, you go against Boston, you're up 3-2. And then you lay an egg in Philly in game 6, and then you really lay an egg in Boston in game 7. So it just felt like it was probably time. There are names that are rumored: Sam Cassell, Mike Budenholzer, Mike D'Antoni. Obviously, we know D'Antoni has the Harden connection. That feels like maybe the pick to make if Harden stays,
Yeah.
but we don't know if he's gonna stay. So
Yeah.
like
It's
that's the
all up
only
in
thing.
there.
Yeah, exactly. But just in general, just kind of a weird situation. And again, like you knew it was coming. And even with Doc, like I mean, again, it's just another scenario where it's another season where he doesn't get it done, right? I think what was the record? I think he has, what, like the most blown playoff leads,
Wow.
by a coach. I think in playoff history, right? Something like that. I mean, again, pity, 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 pity MVP.
Oh yeah, for
Um,
sure. Pity MVP. I want people to know that is a pity MVP. And look at him now.
yeah. I mean, again, at the end of the day, I mean, like the reality is with the regular season awards, it is a regular season award, and playoff,
Don't do
success.
this. Don't do this right
Not
now.
no, I
Please
mean,
don't.
but like no, but like at the same time, like you do have like that is kind of a thing because like even like again, like I said, he was my pick for MVP, but I knew full well that Philly was not going to get it done in the playoffs. The main reason I picked him was because he had that the final 2 weeks where he played really
Oh,
well and Denver phoned it in. If Denver hadn't have phoned it in, I probably would have picked Jokic.
oh my
But I don't think
god.
he could phone it in at the end of the regular season. 2 for 8 in game. Oh, thank you. That's the record. Yeah, that's awful. 2 and 8 in game 7s for Doc Rivers. Yeah, it's bad.
I have nothing to
And like I
say.
said, and 0 for 7 in game 7s is that's what I'm saying. 2 and 8 in game 7s and in different ways. Because again, like this game 7, I mean, like it was just wild how it was a close first half because Philly was up for most of the first half,
Yeah.
despite Harden and Embiid playing awful,
Right.
right? And then, like I said, it was gonna go one of two ways. Either those two guys were gonna pick it up, and Philly was probably gonna pull it out, or they were gonna continue to struggle, and it was gonna be a blowout. And I
Yeah.
think because we know of those two guys, playoff resumes, we pretty much knew where that was going to go, right?
Yeah.
Like, because again, Harden has the playoff resume where, we know he's had a lot of bad playoff games. I feel like for Embiid, that's kind of starting to happen where it feels like now he's starting to build a playoff resume. Not as bad as
He's
Harden's for
not the
sure.
MVP, man.
Yeah, not as bad as Harden's for sure, but definitely it does feel like there's a drop off. And I think, like we talked about, like where we both feel like that's the difference between him and Jokic, where we know Jokic historically raises his game in the playoffs.
And,
Whereas when we look at Joel Embiid, like there's a lot of games where there are games where he's good, but it definitely doesn't feel like he's typically been as good as he's been in the regular season.
And here's the thing with Embiid, bro. My issue with him. How can you be the most valuable player in the league and you do what you did in your Game 7 elimination? Explain that to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Please, somebody. I legitimately want to hear somebody who picked Embiid to be MVP. How can the most valuable player do that?
I guess because it's a regular season award.
At the end of the day, but okay, yeah, it's a regular season award. But at the end of the day, the playoffs show those ramifications. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
but like
he got exposed. That's what I'm saying. It's a fraud and it's a pity MVP because if Jokic did not win back to back, they would have given it to him this year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well,
yes. No, don't do that. You know it's true.
I guess, like I said, I guess the issue is like Denver taking the last, couple months of the regular season off. I think that was the issue.
Sure.
Everybody knew it was very close because I think both you and I for a while had Jokic as the MVP. I only switched to Embiid with the last 2 weeks, but again, I knew full well that Philly was going to disappoint because I knew it was coming. Like even the years where Giannis won the MVP, right? He had the 1 year, I think his second MVP, right? Where that was in the bubble, right? And then they lost to Miami.
Yeah.
Right? And like we were ripping him, or not me, right? But like, obviously a lot of people were ripping to shreds that MVP award because they were like, see, that's why, whoever it was, that should have won MVP, people feel like should have won MVP. And it's like, that's gonna happen. Like, and that's kind of the thing is like,
but this is different though. This is abysmal.
Yeah. And that's the unfortunate part, like with these, like MVP. Oh goodness, the spiders in here. Wow.
Oh.
Wow, that's
you gotta kill it, man.
Yeah, but like in general, like that's the issue. Like with these MVP awards, is that like you just have the issue of like whoever was gonna win it, like something stupid was gonna happen, right? Like imagine if Giannis had won the MVP and then they go out to Miami in 5 this year. That would have been bad.
Yeah,
like
yeah, that would have been horrible.
Yeah, but like just in general, like that's kind of the difficulty with the MVP award is that it is a regular season award.
Right.
So we always know, like, think about it, right? Like Jaren Jackson Jr. wins Defensive Player of the Year. He was great defensively in the regular season, right?
Yeah.
But then we look at, in the postseason, down the stretch, he got kind of torched defensively. And again, not his fault, right? But like I said, that's why it's a regular season award because just in general, I mean, like there's a lot of guys, like you said at the beginning of the podcast, you can see which guys in the playoffs raise their game in the postseason, right? We know Jokic does. We know LeBron and AD do. But then like you look at other guys, right? Like Embiid, like Harden, like their games, they don't
translate well.
Yeah. Is Jamal Murray the best point guard in the remaining finals? I mean, I guess, but it's almost kind of by default.
Yeah, it is because I mean, if you look at the other teams, they don't really have a star point guard. So yeah, he definitely is because I feel like Jamal Murray is a star.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting to me. But yeah, I think, like you said, by default, it has to be by default.
Yeah,
you good? Exactly. You got it?
No.
All right. Well, I'm not gonna lie. Wait, Ja to the Bulls since you want to be hood. So, but yeah, I've been seeing memes about that stuff.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's bad. But I feel like we've kind of run our course. I'm not gonna lie. We're at it like an hour and 33, which is normally, long or longer than we normally go. We're pretty tired, but thankfully, the game kind of ended around like 11:30ish. So, we were able to kind of go live.
Huh? That's the great thing about like the remainder of the playoffs.
So we can go live earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can go live way earlier than, the 1 o'clock times and the 2 a.m. and ending at 2. So, it's not that big of a deal for us right now. You good, man?
I don't know where he is right now.
All right, I'm gonna just get this outro going and then I'll let you handle your spider. But once again, yeah, so we're probably gonna be streaming earlier now, thank goodness, due to the games. But we appreciate all of you who came through to chat with us. We appreciate all the love, all the subs, likes, whatever you guys feel like doing. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We love you guys, and we'll see you the next time that we're gonna go live, which is probably gonna be around elimination time, I think. But it should be fun. These playoffs are looking great, but it's cool, man. But thank you all for coming through once again, and peace out.